Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. On this steamy Sunday morning, we are in summer, that's for sure. Thank you all for joining us this morning for our Together in Transition session. Before I take you through what we're going to do this morning, I wanted to say a thank you to all of you and all of you who are watching. I have never felt so much support from a congregation as I have felt over the last few months. We are in crazy times right now going through this pandemic, and your prayers, your love, your support to the council, to the staff, to the call committee, and most importantly to each other, has been amazing. And the stories I've heard, it's touching that you are all reaching out to each other, checking on each other. Those of you who are in ministries together, it's really special. And I wanted to say thank you, because it's not easy during these times for us to be able to do that as easily as we did before COVID hit. So thank you all. It's very much appreciated. This morning, for our Together in Transition, start with a call process update. Barry's going to come up and give us some updates on our lead candidate. And then I'm going to take over and tell you a little bit about some of the work that we're doing regarding the transition between when Pastor Lanny leaves and when our new senior pastor does arrive. And then I'll flip it over to Courtney and Daryl, and they're going to take you through some of the financial reports that they have been working on. And then we will open it up for questions. So keep your questions going as we go through. And then we will shoot to wrap up by 9:45 so that we can prepare for our 10 o'clock service. So with that, Barry, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning. Wanted to give a report on the call committee. On the 29th of June, about 2 weeks ago, we actually were able to meet face-to-face with our lead candidate. That person was able to come here, and we had a great lunch and afternoon discussion period, got to view the church, and have a very open and honest conversation back and forth in a very good environment. Even though it was kind of hot, at least we managed to find a breeze and some shade, so we were able to have a very good discussion with that candidate. While we were at the church, Pastor Lanny and Lewis were still around, and we asked the candidate if they would be interested in having just meeting them. And that evolved eventually to a fairly lengthy conversation down in the offices. So that wasn't part of our plan, but that was really, I think, a good opportunity to kind of get to know Living Lord and the people around it. So after the visit, I had each of the members of the committee put their thoughts down individually, submit them. Lorene has been our note taker and everything. She assembled all of the comments together, and then we met a week ago Thursday and reviewed all of our reflections and the thoughts and prayers that we had during this process, and we voted unanimously to present this candidate to the council. And what that involves is the committee then tells the folks from the Senate, Pastor Dave Wetter and Reverend B.J. Arnold, that this is the path we want to go forward on. Pastor BJ then contacted the candidate to get feedback to make sure that the candidate was willing to continue along the process, which that turned out to be a very positive response. So we're working towards having a meeting with the council this afternoon to present our recommendation to them. So it's been a very exciting time for the call committee. since the beginning of February when we started all this. It's been frustrating because of the pandemic and not being able to meet with a candidate. We wanted to kind of get into that mode back in May, and we finally got there at the end of June. I want to thank the members of the committee, Lorene Meyer, Marianne Neiman, Seth Pyman, Stephanie Peters, and Samantha Sutherland, who really have put in a lot of time and effort, a lot of prayer, a lot of discernment, a lot of conversation back and forth with the committee to get to the point where we're ready to make a recommendation. So we have a meeting scheduled this afternoon with the council, and we'll go forward from there. Any questions? Thank you.
So with that exciting news, the next steps are going to be meeting with the call committee, getting introduced to the candidate and their recommendations. I'm going to ask the council to take some time after that meeting to discern and pray and put some thought into this candidate to make sure we feel like we are ready to introduce the candidate to the congregation. So, and that will be a very short period of time. We're working through some schedule stuff, but it'll be early next week. But from there, in the call process, I will then contact the candidate. We will try to set up a meet and greet for the congregation so that we can do, and again, with COVID, we're getting creative with how to do it and do it safely. So there will be some combination of probably in-person and virtual ways to meet the candidate. From there, we'll call a congregational meeting. And again, we're working through those details given COVID and the fact that we're going to have to get creative with how we can meet as a congregation. So that is what's coming forward in the call process. So given that, we also know Pastor Lanny's covenant with us is through September 6th. So he will be moving on to a new congregation at that point in time. Lewis will still be here as our ministry associate. But we understand there's going to be a gap in senior pastor coverage, whether it's a Plan A short-term gap and the congregation votes to accept this lead candidate as our new senior pastor. But then there's also a Plan B if we choose not to vote for this person. So we know we have maybe a shorter window where we're going to need some senior pastor coverage or a longer time frame. So we had a call last week with Pastor Dave Wetter at the Synod. He's been working with us through this whole process. And we talked about Plan A, which is to line up some guest pastors, similar to what we did when Pastor Jim left and Pastor Lanny came on board. There was that gap of time. He provided us names, and they were names of some people we've already had as guest pastors, but then also some new ones. But we are working through that Plan A process because then, oh yeah, you got to remember, Lewis and Ella's baby is expected to arrive in early October, and we know babies are on their own time frame, and sometimes from personal experience, they come a little early. So we want to make sure that from the moment Pastor Lanny moves on to when we have that new senior pastor, we do have coverage. So we'll be a short-term Plan A, but then the Synod is also looking at a longer-term Plan B if we need to have months of coverage because we need to find a different candidate if this is the candidate we don't decide to go with. So I wanted to let you know those conversations are happening, the planning's going on, and I've learned through COVID we have to have Plan A and Plan B, and sometimes Plan C to get through things, and we do have to be creative. But I know, again, like I said when I first made my opening comments, the support that we've been given from the entire congregation through this has been amazing. Input, thoughts, prayers, it's just so appreciated. And so more exciting news to come. I'm excited for our meeting this afternoon with the call committee to hear their recommendations. So that will be very exciting. So more stuff to come on that front. With that, Daryl and Cory, to both of you.
Good morning. So I wanted to just provide kind of a financial overview of the church's resources, and we can answer some questions that come up. First of all, we're providing this now. You may remember at the last year's end of the year meeting, we did not have this available. We've been working on some revisions, some new formatting, and I just want to thank Courtney for all the time and effort. What is supposed to be probably a 20-hour a month position has turned into a 20-hour week. So thank you very much, Courtney. I want to thank you very much. She's put in so many hours, and it's been very, very appreciative. So thank you. So as you can see, I hope you can see anyway on the screen, the giving this year has been pretty steady compared to last year. There's been some ups and downs, obviously, with COVID, but generally speaking, it's been pretty steady compared to last year. So far this year, you can see on the general giving, we have a surplus of $16,000. So I think that's just fantastic, relative to where we're at with attendance and COVID and everything. So that looks great. Our mortgage giving is positive by about $1,000, and you may see down there that note number 2, that the mortgage principal payments have been deferred by Thrivent from May through July. So if we did not have that principal deferment, we would have been a little bit negative on the mortgage side, but right now we are on a surplus. And I'll make some comments regarding the mortgage here later on. 2019, we finished in the black, which is great. Thanks to an anonymous donor's financial challenge and matching donations. You guys may remember Lewis shaving his head. I don't know if you can hear me out there. I thought maybe we can get Lewis to do that again this year sometime. I don't know. We'll see. He can't hear me, I don't think, unfortunately. So again, thank you all for your generosity. Because of that, we've been able to stay in the black through the first 6 months of the year, and that's just fantastic. It's allowing us to do God's work. So thank you. As COVID hit and the uncertainty of our giving during COVID, we took certain steps as a financial team to kind of shore up the financial position of the church. I mentioned the mortgage deferment, or the principal deferment, and making interest-only payments. So that was one of the steps. But we also participated in the PPP program. So we applied for a forgiveness for a loan through is it First Community Credit Union, through our bank, and we were approved for $87,000 and change. 89,000, excuse me, 89,000 and change. And that $89,000 is not part of that amount up there. I want to be clear. So the giving from the congregation has taken care of our needs, and the $89,000 is still sitting in the bank and available to us. And we do plan on that to be fully forgiven by the credit union. I think at this point we're still waiting on instructions from them as to the process and how to apply for it. And again, more to come on that. Last thing I'll note on this page is that the finance and stewardship team are meeting on Tuesday to begin planning for the fall pledge appeal program. So we want to get a start on that so we can get planned and moving forward for next year. If you could turn the slide, please. This one's a little more difficult to see. I can't read that at all.
We have paper copies if you'd like one, and you don't have one. If you raise your hand, I can bring them.
Anybody else? Okay. So this is a statement of our financial position for the church. It's a little bit different than we've had. Again, I mentioned that we've been tweaking this and reformatting it and going through it. So as you will see, we have added, previous years we've had the church's checking savings, but we've added all the preschool checking, the preschool savings, teen MOPS checking, and then we've also added the building. In years past, we have not had that on there. So, assets that we have on the top portion are the funds that are available and the building. And we've used the building, a value on the building as basically what we paid for it, plus $100,000 that I believe that we reborrowed. 2008, thank you, that we took additional $100,000 out for some work on the church, and we've added that to the cost, and we're not going to adjust that. That will maintain a $2.3 million value on this balance sheet moving forward. That will not change. The lower section is the liabilities, everything we owe. So there's a section there. The first section of the lower section is the taxes that are due, and then you will see a little bit lower our mortgage currently payable is $1,067,541. The council has agreed at the end of the year, if we have additional funds in the mortgage fund, we're going to take those and look to pay that principal down every year. So as we accumulate funds throughout the course of the year, we will pay that down. If we're short in giving throughout the course of the year, then we just use the funds from the general fund or from the current fund to make the mortgage payment. So again, the church is sitting in pretty good condition here. And then, if you could switch the next slide, please. That one's a little easier to read. So this is actually a statement that shows our fund balances in the accounts themselves. The first portion, the unrestricted funds, those are free for the church to use as we need. We are missing the youth account on this page, I believe, and I believe that will be added next month. Is that correct? Yeah. So that'll be on there next month. The PPP funds are included in the general fund, I believe. Again, Courtney, is that correct? Is that part of that balance or not? It's not? Okay. Okay. I was just kidding. They're not part of that. Okay. And then the restricted funds, as you can see, we have the preschool bank account, which is restricted for preschool use only. We have the new organ fund that was recently started as well. Then all the MOPS. We have an anonymous memorial fund out there with $7,500 in there. So for the total balances of $456,450 and some change.
I'm sorry. On the fund side, yes.
They are.
Yes, they are included.
Okay. So on the fund side, the PPP funds are part of those actual dollars in that amount. So part of the $187,834. Yes. So the $89,000 are part of that. I think that's all I've got. I'm sure there's got to be some questions out there. Yeah, go ahead.
When we talked about the PPP loan and could you guys go back to the very first financial slide, please? And we noted that the PPP funds are not involved. What you do need to know is that all of the expenses are involved. So if we get full forgiveness, the expenses are already showing. The only thing that'll change would be we would be able to add that almost $90,000 as part of the giving. So just to give you a perspective, last year at this time, our general surplus was a negative $61,000. So this is showing without the PPP extra money, but it's showing with all the expenses. So we're not holding that back because the expenses are what they are. On the fund side of the statement balance, you'll notice that the preschool salary fund is a negative amount, and that is because we built the preschool fund salaries into the PPP loan, and knowing that they would possibly be in a financial position because preschool had to stop serving the little ones, we went ahead and covered that amount. So that's why it shows negative in theirs, because we are covering that. If for some reason the PPP loan wouldn't fully cover everything, the preschool is prepared to pay the difference and to cover that themselves. But because it was built in and we fully anticipate the forgiveness, we went ahead and gave them that relief because we were in a position to do that.
Okay. Back over to you.
We have plenty of time for questions and discussion. So I'm going to open it up for anybody who wants to ask anything about the call process, about what you've just seen regarding the funds, the reporting. So let me know what you got for questions. Yes. Good. So the question was, is the financial package completed and has it been shown to the new pastor or the lead candidate? So yes, there is a compensation package, an initial compensation that we have pulled together. The exec team has worked on it. We have also had assistance from the synod so that they can kind of guide us to make sure that we are in the ballpark. And they've given me enough information that when we built this, that we know just enough to make sure that we're compensating this, whatever, if it is this person, for their background, their education, their skills, their experience. So we have an initial one that is completed and ready to present if we choose to do so with this candidate. And we will be doing that after the council has said we would like to proceed as well with them and have a meet and greet with the congregation. Then we will have an initial discussion with the candidate regarding here's what the compensation package we're proposing looks like. Now that said, the congregation, as part of the congregational vote to accept this candidate, there's also a vote to accept the compensation package. So it is in process. We wanted to make sure all our ducks were in a row and we were ready in case we got to that point. Good question. Correct. At this point yet, because we hadn't gotten to this point. So that is correct. The question was, but the candidate has not accepted this package. And no, they have not seen it. I don't know who this candidate is. So, yeah, Sharon. It would be presented pretty quickly. Again, like I said, once the council says, yes, we also agree with the call committee's recommendation, I will make a phone call to that candidate, make sure everything is in line with them, and there will be a communication that gets sent out to the congregation regarding the candidate. And then hopefully some dates as well for a meet and greet, because that's the other thing. I need to get with that person and decide what works on their schedule as well. And of course, they're balancing the congregation they're currently at. So. Right, so the question was, do I have any sense for when we would be able to do that congregational meet and greet, how quickly that could happen? It's very dependent on what they could do and what they're comfortable doing, because they also need to bring if there's a spouse or a family, they also need to coordinate and let them come and meet and see. So it's very dependent on their schedule. I would like to do it as soon as possible, personally, and I know you all probably feel the same way. So August, hopefully, and hopefully sooner in August than later in August, so prayerfully, if that's the case, but very dependent on what their schedule can also allow. The question was, do we know what their commitment is to their current congregation? Right. So they're called to that current congregation, but right. So if they've been called here, then so yeah. The question was, is there a set amount of time that they need to give notice to their current congregation? I do not know for sure. 30 days. I don't know how that works when it comes to their congregation. So Pastor Lanny, I may have you help me answer that one. If you can get your mask off.
Yeah, look at this. I can talk about that and maybe some of the other ones. We can't say for sure at this point. But my experience is that from this point out, it can be 1 to 3 weeks to work out all the details with the candidate. It could go even faster, it could take longer, but that's the average. And then you can't call a congregational meeting or schedule a meet and greet until that's worked out, because you have to have agreement from both parties. And it takes a minimum of 2 weeks to schedule the meeting. And the meet and greet would probably happen within that 2-week time frame, because this is the person you're recommending, right. And then it's a chance to meet and greet that person. I don't know exactly what the provisions are for a pastor submitting a letter of resignation within their congregation. Sometimes it's specified. In my experience, it's usually 3 to 4 weeks notice that they give. So those are some of the time frames then that are typical. 1 to 3 weeks in working out the arrangements, 2 weeks or more for setting the meetings, and then 3 to 4 weeks to give notice and wrap things up and prepare to move. So, add those up and take a guess. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. Other questions, Chet? The question is, what is our relationship with Pastor Lanny after September 6th? Well, he's willing possibly to help us from being the pastor on record if we need that. You want to elaborate any more?
Chet, I hope you remember me fondly, okay? But seriously, I will be stepping away so that you can have a place in your hearts for that next pastor, okay? And since we do not know what kind of pastoral leadership is available for that bridge time, whether it's Plan A short or Plan B longer.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking with the Synod office. Sometimes a pastor will start communicating with the staff and council early, and I actually did that before I came here. I started making myself available by telephone, and Debbie and I and staff and others had lots of conversations in the 4 or 5 months before I arrived. Sometimes that works. Sometimes a pastor such as myself that's leaving says, I'll be available by phone for a few weeks or a month or two, because there are times when staff and council just need to ask a pastor, what do we do about this? And you can't pretend that anybody can step into those shoes at a random time. So I've offered my availability for a while if it comes to that, and so I think the Synod and the officers are going to, as these things play out, it will become very clear. I've never seen, if everybody's in communication about things, I've seen that this transition can be handled very well. And that's my commitment, is to do the things that I know about to help you have the smoothest transition possible. Did that answer your question? Okay. And will you remember me fondly, Chet? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Right. The question was, when we get to that point, if this is our candidate and this is who we want to proceed with, that we're going through the compensation package, is there any wiggle room to negotiate? And the answer is yes, there is. So the Synod has put together a pretty nice spreadsheet that we use as a guideline to develop this. And what's beautiful about it is it gives a range. It gives an ideal, but it gives a high and it gives a low. And so there's wiggle room for us to negotiate a little bit. It's not a huge window, but it's enough that there can be some back and forth to that. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll tell you that some of you might be like, why did we make that decision or extend that question to Thrivent? That was done at the same time that we applied for the SBA PPP. And if any of you have watched the news, you can see, and Daryl can attest to this, that we got approved in the first go-around, which was very, very unusual. We were hopeful. When Pastor Lenny and Daryl called me on a Saturday and said, we want to apply for this, and I said, okay, how long do I have to turn it around, knowing that application was on me? Daryl nicely said to me, well, 2 weeks would be too long. And I said, okay. And I said, ideally, he said, by tomorrow. So we moved very quickly.
That is a true story.
Yeah, we moved very quickly on it, but we also tried to look at what other things we could do. And when I asked Thrivent, part of the application for Thrivent was they wanted to know everything that we were doing, that we weren't just asking them. And so we told them, we are applying for this, but we are also asking for you to give us this window in case we need it. So our hope would be, Linda, everyone, that our mortgage is in a surplus at the end of the year so that we could maybe correct that or be back what you would maybe call current. I mean, we are current, but I mean covering those 3 months. But at the end of every year, that's what the council approved this year, is that we will take that time to look, and if there's ever a surplus, we will make motion to pay some principal extra.
Yes.
It can be applied towards the interest, I believe.
Yeah.
The interest.
Interest.
It can be applied towards the interest, but once it's been forgiven,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay, definitely more to come. I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Lanny. We're going to close in prayer this morning, and then we will go ahead and get ready for our service.
Thank you very much to the four of you for that informative presentation. Let's thank them. Let's pray. Loving God, I thank you very much for the people that are here, for the people that are watching by live stream, for the people that will be watching this later as it's recorded. We know that we're not able to gather together in the way that we had been previously, and yet in a wonderful way through technology and through the bond that you've created through the Holy Spirit, you're allowing us to gather together in person, virtually, and to get around some of these obstacles that we're living with right now. I thank you for the call committee and the lead candidate and their mutual discernment, and I ask that you widen that discernment so that if this congregation or when this congregation is choosing its next senior pastor, that your spirit and discernment and guidance will be present in all of that. I ask you, Lord, for the continued generosity and support from your people for the many, many good ministries of this congregation. I thank you for the way that you've opened their hearts and caused them to give even more generously than usual. We are grateful for your many blessings. We don't often acknowledge them, and yet you shower us with those blessings nevertheless. We pray all these things knowing that you hear us and that you even know further the deepest desires of our heart. In Jesus' name, amen.